Thank you, Alex, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brett Fox, and I'm a regional manager with Bloomberg Law. You know, it's a great afternoon today, especially realizing that I'm so fortunate to work for an organization that has the ability to convene a group of leaders like this, such as yourselves, from the legal industry. After being at Bloomberg Law for 10 years, I've been in front of hundreds of in-house counsel that all have different ideas on how to define success, both personally and professionally. One recent example that I was thinking of is Sonny Cave from On Semiconductor. Like many of you, Sonny is the Executive Vice President, Chief Compliance Officer and Ethics Officer, Chief Risk Officer, and Board Secretary, in addition to being General Counsel. Now, the first thing Sonny said to me as we walked into his office, after asking himself why he had accepted the meeting in the first place, was, "Why Bloomberg?" At the end of that meeting, he confided in me that he hadn't really wanted to take the time to meet initially, as legal research isn't his cup of tea. But he said, what we provide isn't really legal research. It's legal technology that will fundamentally change the way his department works. That's what Michael Bloomberg envisioned with the Bloomberg terminal many years ago, and even more recently has now envisioned with Bloomberg Law. One thing before we move on to the next session, I want to point out on the inside cover of the folder that you have in front of you is the instructions for Slido. You'll go to the website and enter the code if you'd like to ask a question, which I think will be really relevant for the next session. So make sure you find those instructions on the front cover. And now I'd like to introduce our next speaker this afternoon. We're fortunate to have her joining us from Washington, D.C., Dr. Phyllis Schneck, who was previously the top cybersecurity advisor at Homeland Security, and she's currently the global leader of cyber solutions for Promontory Financial Group. Please welcome Phyllis to the stage.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here. I stand, and one other person I think stands between you and drinks, so we'll try to make this good. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm very, very happy to be here. Thank you to Bloomberg for bringing together, as many have said today, this event. Thank you very much to Annette Roberts, who coordinated with my office to help me get here. And thank you to you all for taking some of your time. I know you're going to go home and respond to 500 emails tonight because you were here all day. But thank you to putting your attention to this. In one of the sessions I saw earlier, one of the gentlemen, I don't know if it was a lawyer or not, mentioned that his concern was the policy around the cybersecurity and some of the privacy issues. So what I was going to talk about today is how to use some of this that's coming up. And I have about 8 minutes to do this because they told me to leave time for questions. But how to use some of this as an enabler for your business, how to differentiate. And I'll start out with a little bit of what the current landscape looks like. So a few years ago, between a few and many years ago, I was a chief technology officer over at McAfee Intel. Ran the threat intelligence and also the global public sector work. So I'm a nerd. One of the coolest things I saw back there was that soundboard with the microphone. I'm going to go back and look at that after. You should check that out. It's pretty cool. After that, was asked to come into the administration. I served as the Deputy Undersecretary for almost 4 years over at the Department of Homeland Security. Managed a team of about 2,000 of our finest talent in this country that mitigate and respond to the cyber threats all over the world that involve the federal civilian government and all of our private sector. And our global partners, about 300 international governments. When you look at now coming back into the private sector, I lead a team of folks part of Promontory Financial Group that looks at, for many years, the regulatory landscape. But then how does cyber fit into that? More and more we're seeing the regulators and the lawyers say, watch for the cyber piece. And a lot of folks look at this as checking off a bunch of boxes. There are a lot of frameworks and a lot of regulations, we answer all of them, that allow you to check a bunch of boxes, and they're good. They show you how to be compliant. The bad guy knows how we're compliant. The really sophisticated bad guys, the ones that want your intellectual property and your patents and your work and your client's information, your personal information, they go around the compliance. So what we look at is how we use the resources that people are investing in pleasing the regulators, to work with regulators and the companies and boards of directors to say, use this necessary and good exercise to be more than compliant. Use it to be resilient. So if you think about the cyber threat, just taking a step back, computers are very fast, they're not smart. All of them have a way to take information in. All of them have a way to process it. They read instructions off a list in memory, and they process the next one whether they should or not. So the hackers, all they do is add an instruction into memory. I promise you that's all they do. And they sell the software on the wide open internet to bad guys and people that want to be bad guys. And depending on how much money you have, depending on how much resource you have and the ability to get it, you can get this software that no one has seen before, so technically no one's prepared to prevent against it. And we have people all over the world inserting their instructions into your computer. I'll expand that a little bit. The thermostat in your hotel room, your car, your toaster, a lot of that's all connected now. And it all has a piece of memory that's reading instructions, hopefully from you, sometimes from others if you're not careful. And it's certainly collecting a whole ton of your data. So when you talk about some of the devices in our homes, the devices in our offices, where you are providing data, when you go to websites, look at your phones later, go through the applications under the privacy settings, look at which applications are asking for permission and probably have it to look at your contacts and your photos. The lawyers and the policy are going to help to bring this together as we go forward because we have everything connected. We have anyone in the world that wants it, and I tell people don't try this at home. If you want to go Google and look for, quote, malware or computer software that's available online to help you tell someone's computer to do something else or to go hack something, if you want to use that term. If you're in a hotel, you can do it here. Don't do it at home. They'll find you. Hotel networks are very hard to find because there's a lot of other stuff going on in hotel networks. But you want to look at the fact that this world has three things that are very, very different from before. Number one, wicked fast computing. Bad guys can use artificial intelligence too. They can bring disparate data sets together and make sense of them like we were never able to before. Number two, everything is very equipped to bring in data, collect data, process data, and share data. And we have no idea where it's going. Right? And three is we are storing for efficiency and enjoyment, frankly. We love technology more and more online, so we have to protect that. If you think about just intellectual property alone, if an adversary gets intellectual property from some place that was not sufficiently protected, or even if it was, and they get it and they expose it, my question to the lawyers out there is that still patentable if it's exposed? Because I've been told, and in my own patent work, if it's publicly available, you can't patent it anymore. So what does the new world look like in cyber? Our team mitigated the OPM threat back in June of 15, where the US government lost about 23.5 million people's worth of data. When you look at what went wrong there and some of the decisions we have to make, this goes into what we do today in risk management. Sitting there at those tables in Washington for months, arguing and deliberating, what does exposure mean? If an adversary saw the data, does that mean that it was necessarily copied and sent back to the home planet? Even if it wasn't, doesn't that mean it was exposed? Where is the rest of the data? Where is it stored? It was not at OPM. It was at the Department of Interior, and most people thought that was the Park Service until we lit up some intelligence that we built at Homeland Security. When can you notify? I always advocate notifying soonest. So when we do risk management assessments, we look at the very sophisticated threats. We make sure that folks are resilient. And I always advocate, this is when, not if. It shouldn't even be embarrassing anymore unless you were woefully unprepared. You should have been prepared. You go to the board of directors. This is not a technology conversation. It's a hard conversation. It's a policy and a corporate governance one. What's most important to your company? The IP, the employee information, what you do, your service. You prioritize what is the biggest impact you can take. Then you look at the networks. If you're moving to cloud, that's a big fancy word for storing and running your data somewhere else. But you have to protect those data as they get transmitted from someone else's processing back home to where you need it. Is it encrypted? Encryption, by the way, today is very, very easy compared to what it used to be before. It doesn't slow things down anymore, but people don't know that. It's still a bit expensive. But have you divided what your cyber spend is going to be based on what your board of directors care about? Have you looked at what are the ways that an adversary could look at your company? Do you know, we do this for folks, if we sat your executive team in a room or the top folks in your firm and said, you've had a cyber breach, who do you call? Who's in charge? What's your plan? What do you do? What are you going to tell the other lawyers when their clients start calling your partners and saying, what am I reading in the news? Are they messaged with something to actually say that's full of information? Does your managing partner know what to say? Do your clients get a good piece of information, or are they getting off of CNN? So we want to make sure that you are prepared to do that companies are prepared to respond to this. As going forward, more and more things are going to be connected. We're going to see more and more breaches. One thing that I push, and people find this funny, but I try to bridge the nerd community with the boards of directors. This gets kind of fun, but those of us who are geeks were bred in an environment where when you see operations happening, and they call them IOCs or indicators of compromise, it's Klingon for any Star Trek fans out there, it's nerd speak for there are some symptoms of a potential cyber event. And in the old days, we would want to put them all together and have the story all wrapped up in a bow before you take it upstairs and try to explain it to an executive. Can't do that anymore. We're building escalation protocols where the minute something starts to look like something, it gets escalated to someone like a chief information security officer or someone that can translate between operations speak and business speak to make sure that you limit your liabilities and have an executive decide, is this something worth at least preparing for? Is this something we should be reporting to regulators? And how do we make sure that gets escalated fast enough without interrupting with the response? What's happening in operations during a cyber response is much more complex than it ever would have been 10 years ago. 10 years ago, anyone remember the Melissa virus, the I love you virus? So what they would tell you to do is shut the network down, unplug it. We don't do that today. We want to see where the bad guys will go operationally. But while they're working on an incident response, if you have one, you also have to make sure you keep your business online, that you're messaging constantly, that your CEO, your clients know exactly what to say, what's going on. If there's a machine or a person that you think is involved, accidentally or not, you have to isolate it. It could be insider. And all that's happening while you're trying to track what the bad guys are trying to do. If you unplug the network and they know you were there, they will shut down. And this is like trying to find mice after cheese. They'll burrow and they'll still be there. So it's a very intricate choreograph of how to respond, how to manage the risk, how to have already involved your board of directors in what you're going to do, how to show the world you were prepared, so that the headline, again, when not if, and I don't want to be the Debbie Downer of the day, but the when not if is we were prepared, this was our response. It happens to everybody. I like people to be able to say they got our data but it was encrypted so nothing was exposed. You're with a good firm, move on. So I'm happy to take questions. I was told to keep that short, and I'm happy to talk more. But it's a very brave new world, and it's going to depend on everybody here. This is not a technology problem. In fact, technology in some ways that we enjoy very much, and I advocate big time for technology, technology is causing some of the problem because we're innovating and we're outpacing our policy. And we're going to need real, and not through litigation, but real policy and real thinkers on how to wrap our arms around what data is allowed to be shared and help companies differentiate their actual business based on how much security they've put in, and take that money you're putting into regulatory compliance and do just a little bit more of that to help actually build your business and your resilience. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take lots of questions.
Hi, Phyllis. I have a couple of questions from the audience. One is, if you're attacked by ransomware, how do you respond, and should you pay the ransom?
So I'm a former Department of Homeland Security official, but I'll tell you what I always said before. Don't pay that ransom. You have no idea, first of all, where you're paying it. They're going to ask for it in electronic currency, generally Bitcoin. You have no idea if once it gets received, they won't do it again. Typically, the quote cure or vaccine for ransomware has been have a database backup. So just translating for a minute, ransomware is a piece of malicious software, a computer program that will literally encode or encrypt or hide your very valuable data, like hospital data that's been done before, and you can't unlock it without receiving the key, and they charge you for the key. Many cases, they will get your database, and what they told you a couple of years ago was keep a spare database. You can just, if this happens, use the spare. What the bad guys are doing is they're onto the fact that people back up the spare, so they're connected. This is not a good idea, but they're often connected, so the bad guys are getting both databases. So my answer is twofold. Don't pay the ransomware. Please report it to law enforcement. It helps others when you do that. You're in control of the law enforcement investigation. They don't come in and take your servers out the back window in yellow rainjackets, I promise. How many folks have a good relationship with local law enforcement or federal? Okay, that's not enough. I can help you with this. It is not something that they're going to come in and do anything you don't want them to do. I would say just go have coffee with a local Secret Service agent or FBI agent. They will help you. It's good to know, and you don't want to call 1-800-FBI when your hair's on fire. They're the first to tell you that the junior person right out of Quantico was on the 1-800 desk. It'll take you a month and a half to find a good agent. You want to know somebody beforehand. But secondly, you don't pay it because you don't know where it's going. They'll probably do it again. They'll get your backup database. You want to be prepared.
Another question. If the NSA and the CIA have been breached, do private companies have a chance?
So I'm not going to comment on the whether if of the first part, but everybody's getting breached. So private companies, government agencies, we are all hyper-connected, and it's very difficult to know if there's quite another hole in which you could get in, whether it's a USB stick. You know, if you go outside a tech company and throw a bunch of pretty USB sticks, it's called candy dropping, someone picks it up and sticks it in their computer. Guaranteed. Try it. So you can put software on just about anything, and the fact is, through whether it's wireless or Bluetooth or signing up in a Starbucks, you can pick up a piece of malware. You click on a link. How many folks click on links that people send you? Yeah, okay. So I will tell you, U.S. government, we did a couple of tests. The Transportation Security Agency ran a big one last year. Peter Neffinger, who ran it, he sent out a big ad. He said, free Washington Redskins tickets. He had a huge turnout over at Coast Guard headquarters where everybody clicked on that, went over to collect their tickets, and they said, yeah, you have 8 hours of cyber training to sit through. The other one that got some folks was, and these are training exercises, right? Because private companies are going to get breached. People are going to get breached. It's when and not if, just be prepared. The other one that got everybody was, we saw your name on Ashley Madison, click here to clean it up. I can't make this up. Yeah.
Another question is, as a general counsel, how do you view the difference between data breach notifications in the US and in Europe?
Okay, so I'm not a general counsel. I'm just going to say that for everybody. The data breach notifications here, we'll probably have 49 different. California has a very strong one, I think maybe the first one. But we'll probably have 49 different versions of it, which makes it very complicated, not only for the people that are trying to help you build your breach response, because you probably have clients all over the country and all over the world. The Europeans are far ahead of this on GDPR. They do a lot of work in protecting their privacy. I think the US is a little bit behind that. But you have to watch things, at least from our perspective, when we have customers, their networks are all connected. Even if they don't think they are, their networks are communicating with their backups or other customers or other parts of the company over in Europe, and that makes them susceptible and have to fill the regulatory compliance of GDPR. So I think the Europeans are way ahead of us. Americans give out their data, whether it's on social media or your grocery store card. Right? You give up all that data, your name, address, and everything you buy, they're tracking, so you can save 15 cents on a watermelon tomorrow. We have no idea as Americans where that data is going, and in Europe, I think they're doing a better job of that.
One last question. If you're not a technology company, how do you get your board of directors to really think about these issues and give you resources to solve the problems?
You can show them a picture of an orange jumpsuit. What I like to do is really just talk to boards as this is not a tech problem. This is about your company, it's about your brand, your reputation, and about being prepared. And I've noticed a lot of boards of directors and a lot of people will tell you boards need to have a cyber person. And we've seen this be a big problem because boards, when they interview cyber people, they come out of it. People have shared this with me and they say, great expertise, but that person's not a board director. You know, that person's not 70, that person's never done this, they don't know how to spell shareholder. So they're now looking at how to get cyber advisors on boards of directors. What we have to do is bridge that gap and start to teach boards of directors that this is as big a risk as leaving the doors open at night.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.